The Great Hall of Axiom Prime was the largest room ever built in the known galaxy. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. 12 massive chairs circled the central platform, each one designed for a different species. Each one held a representative of the elder races who had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the center of the platform. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes. She had spent 30 years fighting for humanity's place among the stars. Today, she could feel that fight coming to an end. High Arbiter Veloth rose from his chair. He was Thenari, a being made of living crystal. Light passed through his body and scattered into rainbows on the floor. His voice rang like glass bells when he spoke. "The Galactic Concord has gathered for the Centennial Review," Veloth announced. "Today we discuss the status of the probationary species known as humans." Elena kept her face calm. She had expected this moment for years. "Humanity joined our Concord 200 years ago," Veloth continued. "In that time, they have spread to over 3,000 worlds. They have inserted themselves into every system, every station, every corner of our civilization. We have contributed to your civilization," Elena said. Her voice was steady. "We have worked alongside every species here. You have caused chaos." Veloth cut her off. His crystal body flashed with cold blue light. "Your species is emotional, irrational. You form attachments to everything you encounter. You change systems that have worked for millennia because they feel wrong to you." A rumble of agreement came from the other chairs. The Keth delegate, a massive creature covered in armored plates, slammed one fist against his armrest. "Humans started a war between my people and the Sorali," he growled. "They had no business interfering in our affairs." Elena turned to face him. "Ambassador, with respect, humans ended that war. Our mediator spent 15 years building understanding between your species. Before we arrived, you had been fighting for 3 centuries, and now you take credit for our peace." The Keth snapped. Typical human arrogance. Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to list every contribution humanity had made. The quantum fold medicine that had saved billions of lives. The hybrid crops that fed dozens of hungry worlds. The engineers who kept ancient stations running. The nurses who held dying aliens and learned their languages just to offer comfort. But she could see the truth in their eyes. They had already decided. High Arbiter Veloth raised one crystalline hand for silence. "I move that humanity be expelled from the Galactic Concord. They will have 90 cycles to remove all personnel from Concord space. After that, they will be barred from our trade routes, our stations, and our worlds. All treaties with humanity will be void." The vote happened quickly. One by one, the elder races raised their symbols of agreement. The Thenari, the Keth, the Sorali, the Mendari with their floating gas bodies, the Vorn with their 1,000 eyes. 11 species voted to remove humanity from the galaxy's heart. Only one abstained. The Vrethkai ambassador was an insectoid creature with 4 arms and wings that never stopped moving. She was ancient even by the standards of the elder races. Her compound eyes watched everything, understood everything. "The Vrethkai do not vote," she said. Her voice was clicks and whistles that the translation systems turned into words. "We only warn." Veloth turned to her with impatience. "Warn us of what, Ambassador Crix? You do not understand what you are removing." Crix's wings beat faster. "Humans are not what you think they are. They are not simply workers or traders or mediators. They are something else, something you have never seen before. They are a young species that has overstepped its place," Veloth said. "Nothing more. Then you are blind." Crix folded all 4 arms. "And you will learn what blindness costs." The vote stood. 11-0. With one abstention. Humanity was expelled from the Galactic Concord. Elena Vasquez stood in silence as the delegates began to leave. She watched them go. These ancient beings who had built empires among the stars. They were so certain of their wisdom, so confident that they understood the universe. High Arbiter Veloth paused beside her on his way out. Up close, she could see the complex patterns inside his crystal body. He was beautiful, in a cold and distant way. "You have 90 cycles," he said. "I suggest you use them wisely." "We will," Elena replied. "We always do." Veloth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You humans always think you are important. You always believed that without you, things would fall apart. But we built this concord before your species existed. We will continue long after you are forgotten." Elena looked up at him. She was so much smaller than these beings, so much younger, so fragile, in her soft human body with its short human lifespan. But she smiled. "We will leave," she said. "We will honor every contract. We will train replacements. We will go quietly, professionally, and with dignity, because that is what humans do." Veloth nodded, satisfied. "But I want you to remember this moment," Elena continued. "I want you to remember my face and my words, because when it all falls apart, and it will fall apart, I want you to know that we warned you." For just a moment, something flickered in Veloth's crystalline form. Doubt, perhaps, or irritation. Then it passed, and he walked away without another word. Elena stood alone in the great hall. The clouds near the ceiling had turned gray, as if a storm was coming. The light from the artificial sun cast long shadows across the floor. Her communication device buzzed. She answered it. "Ambassador?" The voice belonged to David Chen, the maintenance chief of Axiom Prime. He had worked on this station for 40 years. He knew every pipe, every wire, every strange noise in the night. "We heard the news. What do we do?" Elena took a deep breath. "We do what we always do, David. We do our jobs until the last moment. We leave everything better than we found it. And then we go home." There was a long pause. "They're making a mistake, aren't they?" "Yes," Elena said. "They are. Should we?" "I don't know. Refuse to go? Fight back?" Elena shook her head, even though he couldn't see it. "No, that's not who we are. We don't force ourselves where we're not wanted. We just hope they realize what they've lost before it's too late." She ended the call and walked toward the exit. The great hall echoed with her footsteps, small and human and alone. Outside, a transport waited to take her back to the human quarter. Through the window, she could see the stars, millions of them, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. Humanity had come so far. They had reached out to touch those stars. They had made friends among alien species. They had built lives in places no human had ever imagined. And now they were being told to leave. Elena watched the stars and thought about the future. She thought about the 90 cycles ahead, and the chaos that would come after. She thought about the elder races and their pride. She thought about all the small, invisible things that humans did every day, the things that no one noticed until they stopped. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. They had no idea what they had done. They had no idea what humans really were, or why they mattered, but they would learn. The galaxy would teach them. The 90 cycles of humanity's departure began on a quiet morning. No protests filled the streets. No angry mobs stormed the Concord headquarters. No human warships gathered at the borders. The elder races had prepared for violence, for chaos, for the emotional outbursts they expected from such a primitive species. Instead, they got something that disturbed them far more. They got silence. David Chen woke up on the first day of the countdown and did exactly what he had done for 40 years. He showered, dressed in his maintenance uniform, and walked to Deck 7 of Axiom Prime. The thermal regulators were making that sound again, a faint clicking that only he could hear. His Thenari replacement followed him like a shadow. The crystal being was young by his species standards, only 800 years old. His name was Christos, and he had studied engineering for 3 centuries. "The thermal regulators are here," David said, pointing to a panel in the wall. "They control the temperature for this whole section. About 6,000 people live in these quarters. I am familiar with the design," Christos said. His voice had the same musical quality as High Arbiter Veloth's, but colder, less patient. "My people built this station." David nodded. He did not argue. He simply opened the panel and showed Christos the machinery inside. "This one is touchy," David said, tapping a small component. "The official readings say it's fine, but you'll want to check it every week. Sometimes it drifts a little, and if you don't catch it early, the whole system can overheat." Christos looked at the component. His crystalline eyes scanned it with perfect precision. "The readings are within normal parameters. There is nothing wrong with it. The readings are fine," David agreed. "But the machine doesn't feel right. You have to listen to it. Feel the vibration through the floor. When it changes, I do not rely on feelings," Christos interrupted. "I rely on data. Perhaps that is why your species is being removed. You trust your instincts over your instruments. David was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. A small and tired smile. Maybe you're right, he said. He handed over his access codes and his toolkit. The job is yours now. Good luck. He walked away without looking back. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out 1,000,000,000 times. On the agricultural world of Vareth IV, human farmers said goodbye to the fields they had worked for generations. Maria Santos stood in the middle of a vast grain field, her boots covered in red soil. Around her, the stalks swayed in the warm breeze. A Mendari observer floated beside her. The Mendari were gas beings, clouds of colored vapor held together by force fields. This one was named Whisper, and she had been assigned to learn human farming techniques. The hybrid crops are in the database, Maria said. Everything you need to know is there. Planting times, water levels, harvest cycles. We have reviewed the information, Whisper said. Her voice was like wind through leaves. It seemed straightforward. Maria hesitated. There was so much she wanted to say. About how the soil changed after heavy rains. About how the crops on the eastern hills needed more attention than the ones in the valley. About the way the insects behaved differently each season, and how you had to adjust for that. But the Mendari did not want to hear it. They had the data. They believed that was enough. The eastern fields are tricky, Maria finally said. The soil there is. We have the soil composition data, Whisper interrupted. Thank you for your service. Your transport leaves in the morning. Maria looked at the fields one last time. She had raised 3 children on this world. She had buried her husband under the old tree by the river. This place was her home, but it was not her home anymore. Take care of them, she said softly. She was not sure if she meant the crops or the people who would eat them. Whisper did not answer. The days passed. 30 cycles. 50. 70. The humans continued to leave, and they continued to leave quietly. They trained their replacements when asked. They documented everything. They said goodbye to friends they had known for decades. Some of those goodbyes were hard. On a medical station called Sanctuary, a human nurse named James held the hand of a dying Keth warrior. The Keth were proud creatures, covered in armor and raised for battle. They did not show weakness. They did not ask for comfort. But this one was old, and his armor was cracked, and his eyes were clouded with pain. You should not be here, the Keth rasped. Your people are leaving. You should be with them. James smiled. I have 2 more days. I'm not leaving until I have to. Why? The Keth did not understand. I am your enemy. My people voted to remove yours. James squeezed his hand gently. You're not my enemy. You're my patient. And I don't leave patients alone. The Keth was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I have killed many beings in my life. I have fought in wars across a dozen worlds, but I have never understood your species. He looked at James with those clouded eyes. Why do you care so much? James thought about the question. It was a question he had been asked many times, in many ways. I don't know, he admitted. We just do. We see someone suffering, and we want to help. We see someone lonely, and we want to be their friend. It's not logical. The Keth died 3 hours later, with James still holding his hand. On day 89, Ambassador Elena Vasquez gave her final speech. She stood on the observation deck of Axiom Prime, looking out at the gathered crowd. Thousands of humans had come to hear her words. Behind them, through the massive windows, the stars waited. Tomorrow, we leave, Elena said. Her voice was carried by speakers throughout the station. We leave not because we want to, but because we respect the decision that was made. We are guests in this galaxy, and when the hosts ask us to go, we go. The crowd was silent. Many of them were crying. I know this is hard, Elena continued. Many of you have built lives here. You have friends among the other species. You have jobs that matter to you. You have memories that you will carry forever. She paused, looking out at their faces. But I want you to remember something. What makes us human is not where we live. It is how we live. It is the way we care for each other and for others. It is the way we find hope in the darkness. It is the way we love and fight and dream. She smiled through her own tears. They may dismiss us. They may forget us. But they cannot take away what we are. And someday, maybe soon, maybe in 1,000 years, they will remember. They will understand what they lost. The next day, the last human vessel crossed the border into unaligned space. The Galactic Concord watched them go with relief. The human problem was solved. The chaos was over. Now things could return to normal. For 30 cycles, everything seemed fine. The thermal regulators on Deck 7 showed normal readings. The crops on Vareth 4 grew tall and green. The medical stations reported no unusual problems. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't. The first sign of trouble came on a cold morning in Deck 7. Christos was in his quarters when the alarm sounded. He had been studying ancient Thenari poetry, a hobby he enjoyed during his rest cycles. The harsh screaming of the emergency signal shattered his peace like a hammer through glass. He moved quickly through the corridors. Other Thenari joined him, their crystal bodies flashing with concerned colors. By the time they reached Deck 7, the damage was already done. The thermal regulators had failed. Not slowly, not with warning, but all at once. One moment they were working perfectly. The next, they were pumping freezing gas into 6,000 living spaces. Christo stared at the panel in disbelief. The readings showed nothing wrong. Every instrument said the system was operating normally. But the ice forming on the walls told a different story. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "The data shows no problems." A younger engineer checked the logs. There was a slight vibration change. 3 days ago. It was within acceptable limits. Christos remembered David Chen's words. The touchy component. The weekly checks. The feeling that something was wrong. He had ignored it. He had trusted the data. By the time they fixed the regulators, 42 beings were dead. Frozen in their sleep because a crystal engineer did not know how to listen to a machine. On Vareth 4, the disaster took longer to arrive. The first season after the humans left was excellent. The crops grew tall and strong, just as the data predicted. The Mendari observers congratulated themselves on their efficient management. The second season was different. Whisper floated over the eastern fields with growing confusion. The crops were dying. Not slowly, not in patches, but everywhere at once. The leaves turned yellow, then brown, then black. The stalks collapsed into the soil. "This is not in the data," Whisper said. Her voice was troubled, uncertain. "The soil composition is correct. The water levels are correct. Everything is correct." But Maria Santos had known something that was not in any database. She had known that the eastern fields needed special attention after the winter rains. The soil changed in ways that no instrument could detect. You had to walk the fields yourself. You had to feel the dirt between your fingers. You had to know. The Mendari did not know. They had the data, but they did not have the understanding. The famine started on Vareth 4. It spread to 9 other systems that depended on those crops. Millions went hungry. Thousands died. And still, the elder races did not understand. On the border between Keth and Sorali space, an automated defense station received a sensor reading. A ship was approaching Keth design, military configuration. The automated system followed its programming. It identified the ship as a threat and opened fire. The ship was not a military vessel. It was a trading ship, bringing medical supplies to a Sorali colony. The Keth captain had borrowed a decommissioned military hull because it was cheaper than buying a new one. A human operator would have noticed the difference. A human would have seen the cargo manifests, heard the captain's confused transmissions, recognized the cultural context. Humans had spent decades learning the subtle differences between Keth aggression and Keth commerce. The automated system saw only data points. It did not understand context. It did not ask questions. 18 Keth traders died in the explosion. Within hours, the Keth fleet was mobilizing. Within days, the war that humans had spent 15 years ending was burning again. Ambassador Crix of the Vrethkai requested an emergency session of the Concord. The Great Hall of Axiom Prime was colder now. The heating systems were not working properly, though no one could explain why. The elder races sat in their massive chairs and listened with growing impatience as Crix presented her data. In 200 cycles since humanity's departure, Crix said, system failures have increased by 4,000%. Diplomatic incidents have increased by 340%. 12 conflicts have erupted in zones that were stable for centuries. She displayed holographic images, burning fields, frozen corridors, ships exploding in the darkness between stars. These are not random events, Crix continued. They are connected. They all have one thing in common. High Arbiter Veloth's crystal form flickered with annoyance. You blame the humans for problems they did not cause. They are gone. These failures are our responsibility now. Exactly, Crick said. They are your responsibility. And you are failing. The hall erupted in angry voices. The Keth delegate roared that he would not be insulted. The Mendari whispered threats of economic sanctions. The Vorn's 1,000 eyes blinked with fury. Crix waited for silence. When it came, her voice was calm and cold. Humans do not simply perform tasks, she said. They adapt. They notice. They care about things that cannot be measured. They form bonds with machines and people and systems. They adjust and change and fix problems before those problems have names. She looked around the hall at the angry faces. You did not remove workers. You removed the immune system of this concord. You removed the beings who held everything together. Not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. Veloth stood, his crystal body flashing with cold blue light. You speak of humans as if they are special. They are not. They are a young species with primitive emotions. We have survived for millennia without them. We will continue to survive. Will you? Crix asked. Look around you, High Arbiter. Your station is failing. Your crops are dying. Your peace is breaking. And you still cannot admit that you made a mistake. Veloth said nothing. The silence stretched on. Finally, one of the other delegates spoke. She was Vorn, an ancient species with 1,000 eyes that could see in every direction at once. Her name was Observer of Patterns, and she was the oldest being in the room. The Vrethkai ambassador raises valid concerns, Observer of Patterns said. But we cannot reverse a decision made by the full Concord. It would show weakness. It would prove that we were wrong. You were wrong. Crick said simply. The Vorn's 1,000 eyes narrowed. Perhaps, but admitting it would cause more chaos than continuing forward. We must find our own solutions. We must adapt. Can you? Crix asked. Can you learn to do what humans did naturally? Can you learn to care about things that do not appear in your data? No one answered. The session ended without resolution. The elder races returned to their worlds and their problems. They tried to fix the systems that were breaking. They tried to train their people to think like humans. They failed, because thinking like a human was not something you could learn from a database. It was not something you could program into an automated system. It was something you had to feel. Deep in whatever part of you held love and fear and hope. The elder races had spent so long being logical that they had forgotten how to feel, and now they were paying the price. On Axiom Prime, the lights flickered in Deck 12, then Deck 15, then Deck 23. The station was dying, slowly and quietly, one system at a time. Christos stood in the maintenance center, surrounded by screens showing error after error. He thought about David Chen, who had tried to warn him. He thought about the touchy component and the weekly checks and the sounds that machines made when something was wrong. He thought about a human who had listened to a station breathe. And for the first time in his 800 years of life, Christos felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. The galaxy was burning. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in enough places that the darkness between stars was filled with the light of destruction. Wars that had slept for centuries woke up hungry. Systems that had worked for millennia broke down. The great machine of galactic civilization was coming apart at the seams. The Keth-Sorali War spread like fire through dry grass. What began as a misunderstanding at a border station became a full invasion within months. The Keith were proud and angry. The Sorali were frightened and desperate, without human mediators to bridge the gap between them. They spoke only in the language of weapons. 3 other species were pulled into the fighting. Ancient alliances activated. Old grudges resurfaced. The Concord's peacekeeping fleet, designed to prevent wars rather than fight them, was torn apart in the first major battle. 18 billion beings died in the first year. The number kept climbing. On the medical station Sanctuary, a plague was spreading. It had started small, a strange cough among the Vorn patients, a fever that did not respond to treatment. The automated medical systems analyzed the symptoms and found nothing unusual. The data said everything was fine. But humans had noticed something weeks earlier. The nurses had seen patterns in the way patients moved, the way they spoke, the way their 1,000 eyes lost focus. They had filed reports, raised concerns, suggested quarantine. Those reports had been dismissed as emotional overreaction. The humans were gone now, and their warnings had been deleted from the system as irrelevant. By the time the plague was officially recognized, it had spread to 40 systems. Millions of Vorn were sick. Hundreds of thousands were dying, and the cure, which human researchers had been developing before the expulsion, existed only in notes that no one had thought to save. The economic systems of the Concord collapsed next. Humans had served as intermediaries between species that could not trade directly. The Mendari, being gas creatures, could not handle solid goods. The Keth, with their armored bodies, could not work in the delicate environments the Thenari required. Humans had moved between all of them, adapting to every situation, building bridges that no one else could build. Without those bridges, trade slowed. Then it stopped. Worlds that depended on imports began to run out of food, medicine, fuel. The wealthy species hoarded resources. The poor ones begged, then stole, then fought. High Arbiter Veloth watched from his homeworld as the galaxy fell apart. Thin was a beautiful planet, a world of crystal mountains and glass seas. The Thenari had shaped it over millions of years into a perfect monument to their species. Every structure was a work of art. Every surface caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. But Thin was unstable. Its core was slowly shifting, and only careful management kept the planet from tearing itself apart. For the past 3 centuries, human engineers had maintained the gravitational stabilizers that held Thin together. They had made tiny adjustments every day, corrections so small that no instrument could detect them. Their replacements followed the procedures exactly. They did everything right. But the procedures did not include the adjustments. The humans had never written them down because they were not conscious decisions. They were instinct, intuition, the feel of a planet breathing beneath their feet. The first earthquake hit without warning. The crystal mountains shattered. The glass seas cracked into deadly shards. Millions of Thenari died in moments. Veloth stood in his tower and watched his world break. The rainbow light that had always filled his home turned red with fires and brown with dust. The sound of crystal screaming was something he would never forget. He had been so certain, so confident that humans were primitive, unnecessary, replaceable. He had led the vote to expel them. He had spoken the words that sent them away, and now his world was dying because of it. In desperation, the Concord sent a message to human space. The transmission was humble, almost begging. It acknowledged mistakes. It promised changes. It offered whatever the humans wanted: money, power, territory, status, anything, if they would only return and fix what was broken. The response came from the newly formed human coalition. President Elena Vasquez, the same woman who had stood alone in the Great Hall and warned them, read it aloud to her council. 3 words: "You voted." Remember? Some of the council members wanted to help. They argued that innocent beings were suffering, that children were dying, that humanity's values demanded compassion even for those who had rejected them. Elena listened to them all. She was older now, her hair fully gray, her face lined with years of leadership, but her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still steady. "I understand your compassion," she said. "It is one of the best things about our species. But we cannot save people who do not want to be saved. We cannot help those who have rejected our help. They are asking for help now," one council member pointed out. "They are asking us to fix their problems while they remain in power," Elena corrected. "They are not asking to change. They are not asking to understand. They are asking for a service, like calling a repair company to fix a broken machine." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, human cities stretched to the horizon, new cities, built in the years since the expulsion. They were beautiful in their own way, full of light and life, and the chaotic energy that only humans could create. "We offered them partnership," Elena said. "We offered them friendship. We offered them everything we had, and they threw it away because we made them uncomfortable, because we were too emotional, too irrational, too human." She turned back to face the council. "If we go back now, nothing will change. They will use us until the crisis is over, and then they will dismiss us again. They will learn nothing. They will grow nothing. And the next time they face a challenge, they will expect us to save them once more." The council was silent. "The only way they will truly learn," Elena continued, "is if they face the consequences of their choice. The only way they will understand what we are is if they experience what we are not." The decision was made. The human coalition would not return. They would not rescue those who had rejected them, but they would wait. In the years that followed, the Galactic Concord continued to collapse. The Keth and Sorali War ended only when both species were too exhausted to fight. The plague burned through the Vorn population until natural immunity finally emerged after 60% of their species was dead. The famine spread and retreated, leaving scars that would take generations to heal. The Thinari homeworld of Thin became uninhabitable. The survivors became refugees, scattered across the galaxy with nothing but memories of rainbow light. Veloth was among them. He traveled from station to station, world to world, carrying the weight of what he had done. He no longer wore the title of High Arbiter. That title meant nothing now. He thought often of Elena Vasquez and her warning. He thought of the humans he had dismissed, the ones who had tried to tell him things he did not want to hear. He thought of David Chen and his touchy machines. He thought of Maria Santos and her fields. He thought of James, the nurse, holding the hand of a dying Keth. He thought of all the small kindnesses he had never noticed, the invisible work that had held everything together, and he understood, finally, what humans truly were. They were not workers. They were not servants. They were not a resource to be used and discarded. They were the heart of the galaxy, the connection between all things, the beings who cared when no one else would, and the galaxy had cut out its own heart. Now it was bleeding. The question was whether it could survive long enough to heal. 50 years had passed since the expulsion. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was the quiet of exhaustion, not peace. The great civilizations of the elder races had fallen like towers of sand, where once they had ruled thousands of worlds. Now they struggled to hold a few dozen. Where once they had commanded fleets of starships, now they traveled in worn vessels held together by hope and rust. The human coalition had grown in those 50 years. It had welcomed refugees from the chaos. It had built new worlds, new stations, new systems. It had become something the elder races had never expected, a power in its own right, stable and strong, while everything else crumbled. On the border between human space and the ruins of the Concord, a new station floated in the darkness. It was called New Horizon, and it was the gateway between two galaxies, one rising, one falling. Ambassador Elena Vasquez waited in the reception hall. She was old now, past 90, but her mind was still sharp and her eyes still clear. She had spent her whole life fighting for humanity's place among the stars. Now, at the end of that life, she was about to see the results. A delegation was coming, not to demand or threaten or negotiate, but to ask, to beg, if necessary. The proud elder races had finally run out of pride. The doors opened, and they entered. There were representatives from each of the surviving species. The Keth delegate walked with a limp, his armor cracked and never repaired. The Mindari floated weakly, their colors faded to pale shadows. The Vorn moved slowly, their 1,000 eyes dull with grief, and at the front of the group, leading them with hesitant steps, was Veloth. He was barely recognizable. The beautiful crystal of his body was cracked and clouded. The light that had once scattered through him in rainbows was dim and gray. He looked like what he was, a broken being, carrying the weight of a broken world. Elena stood to greet them. She did not smile, but she did not frown either. Her face was calm, patient, waiting. Veloth stopped a few steps away from her. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if seeing a human for the first time. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said. His voice was still musical, but softer now, stripped of its old arrogance. "Thank you for receiving us. You are welcome here," Elena said. "All beings are welcome in human space." Veloth nodded slowly. He seemed to be struggling with something, fighting against a lifetime of pride and certainty. Finally, he spoke. "I have a question," he said. "Before we discuss anything else, I need to ask you something. I have traveled for years, thinking about this question. I have lost everything I once had, my world, my title, my certainty, and I still do not understand." Elena waited. "What are you?" Veloth asked. "What are humans? We thought we knew. We thought you were a young species, emotional and irrational, useful for simple tasks, but not important. We were wrong. So what are you truly?" Elena considered the question. She had been asked it many times, in many ways, by many beings. But this was the first time she felt that the person asking truly wanted to know. She walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The delegation followed her with their eyes. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy," Elena began. "We are not the smartest. We are not the oldest or the fastest or the most advanced. By every measure you used to judge us, we were indeed inferior. She turned back to face them. But you measured the wrong things. Elena walked among the delegates, looking at each of them in turn. Humans, connect, she said. That is what we do. That is what we are. We form bonds with everything we encounter. Other humans, other species, animals, machines, places, ideas. We adopt alien pets and learn alien languages for no reason except that we want to understand. We notice when a machine sounds wrong and when a colleague seems sad. We remember birthdays and favorite foods and small details that no one asked us to remember. She stopped beside the Keth delegate. Your people thought we were interfering in your war with the Sorali. But we were not interfering. We were connecting. We learned your language, your culture, your history. We learned the Sorali's language, culture, history, and because we understood both of you, we could help you understand each other. She moved to the Mendari. Your people thought we were primitive because we worked with our hands in the soil. But we were not just working, we were listening. We felt the earth and the weather and the seasons. We knew things that no database could tell us, because we paid attention to things that no database recorded. She moved to the Vorn. Your people thought we were emotional because we grieved when others suffered. But that grief was not weakness, it was attention. We noticed suffering because we cared about suffering, and because we noticed, we acted. We saw your plague coming before your instruments did, because we watched faces and movements and small signs of distress. Finally, she stopped in front of Veloth. You saw us as primitive, Elena said, but we were your connective tissue. We were the ones who cared about the things that could not be measured. We were the immune system of your concord, fixing problems before they had names, building bridges between species that could not understand each other. She looked into his clouded crystal eyes. When you cut us out, you did not remove a part. You removed what made you whole. Veloth was silent for a long time. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably, but he did not move. He seemed to be processing something vast and painful, something that challenged everything he had ever believed. Finally, slowly, he did something that no Thinnery had done in 10,000 years. He knelt. It was a gesture of absolute humility, of complete surrender. His cracked crystal body lowered to the floor, and his head bowed until it almost touched the ground. Teach us, he whispered. Teach us how to care. Elena looked down at him, this ancient being who had once dismissed her entire species as irrelevant. She thought of all the suffering his pride had caused. She thought of the billions who had died because the elder races could not admit they were wrong. She thought of all the reasons she had to refuse. And then she thought of what it meant to be human. She extended her hand. That is all we ever wanted to do, she said. Veloth looked up. Something sparked in his clouded eyes, hope, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. He reached out and took her hand, his crystal fingers cold against her warm skin. The other delegates watched in silence. Some were crying. Some were too stunned to react. But all of them felt something shift in the universe, something that had been broken for 50 years beginning to heal. The work that followed was long and difficult. The elder races had to learn things they had never valued. Empathy, intuition, connection, care. They had to admit their mistakes and face their failures. They had to accept that beings they had dismissed as inferior were, in many ways, their teachers. But they learned. It took decades, but they learned. 50 years after the kneeling, a new concord was founded. It was not like the old one, not a hierarchy of elder races ruling over younger ones, but a true partnership of equals. Humans were not probationary members this time. They were the heart of the new alliance, the connection that held everything together. A new station was built at the center of the new concord. It was called Axiom Reborn, and it was designed by humans and Thinari and Keth and Mendari and Vorn and Vrithkai, all working together. It was not as elegant as the old Axiom Prime, but it was stronger, more alive, more real. On the day the station opened, a ceremony was held in the Great Hall. Representatives from every species gathered to unveil a new motto, carved into the walls in every language known to the galaxy. Ambassador Crix of the Vrithkai, now ancient beyond measure, read the words aloud. Strength is not power. Strength is connection. Elena Vasquez was not there to see it. She had died peacefully 2 years earlier, surrounded by friends of a dozen species, but her words lived on, repeated by generations of humans and aliens who had learned what she taught. They had dismissed humans once. They had thought connection was weakness. and emotion was primitive. They had been wrong, and from the ashes of their arrogance, something new had grown. Something better. Something that would last not because it was powerful, but because it was loved. The stars still burned in the darkness. The galaxy still turned in its endless dance. But now, for the first time in 1,000 years, it turned together, connected, human, whole.